Well, the month of August we've designated as Unity Heritage Month. We're doing a series in honor of the birthdays of our co-founders who were both born during August, and we've been focusing on some of the key ideas and teachings of unity along with our unity history, because all of this movement didn't develop in a vacuum. There were reasons why they did the things they did and why they formulated the ideas that they came up with. You know, the Fillmores didn't just sit down one day and decide to start writing self-help books, okay? That's not how it started. They were up to something much bigger than that. They were starting a revolution. It was a rebellion against the way that traditional Christianity regarded human beings, or perhaps more precisely, the nature of humankind. You may recall from week 1 of our series at the beginning of the month, I shared some quotes that were from Myrtle's letters, and she was explaining to a friend why she never joined her family's church, all right? Remember, here's what she said. She said, "I marveled that my wonderful mother, who loved so devotedly, could have a God who might punish or take the lives of his children." So there's that idea that she was running up against, that somehow we are deserving of punishment, torment, hellfire, whatever. She goes on to say, "There was something in me that protested against the declaration that I was by nature evil and sinful." And there we come up against that idea of original sin, that we're born in original sin because of, well, they blame it all on Eve, right? But Adam and Eve tempted Adam. So she was rejecting the message that human beings were in any way inherently sinful, disobedient, and evil by nature, which was heresy in the eyes of Orthodox Christianity, because again, as I said, one of the core teachings is original sin, or if you subscribe to something called Calvinist theology, John Calvin, who said that human beings by their nature were totally depraved. Not enough to have original sin, but according to Calvinism, we are totally depraved, and we are beyond any kind of self-help, and it's only by the mercy and grace of God that we have any capacity to do anything good at all. Wow, what a positive outlook on life that is. So they rejected that, both Charles and Myrtle, because they had a much more positive view of the essential nature of humankind. Now, this is how Charles Fillmore describes human nature in one of his early books. He says, "Every man asks the question at some time, 'What am I?' God answers, 'Spiritually, you are my idea of myself as I see myself in the ideal. Physically, you are the law of my mind executing that idea.'" Now that's a far cry from worthless sinner, worm in the dust, utterly depraved, and that kind of thing, right? For Charles, humankind was nothing less than the highest expression of the divine logos in action. And logos is this wonderful Greek word that philosophers use to describe the natural law or principle by which this universe comes into being. And so for Charles, humankind and logos, principle, or if you would rather use the word God, are intertwined. Now, you don't often hear me quoting extensively from the work of Charles Fillmore because, as I mentioned earlier, they weren't writing self-help books. His stuff is tightly packed. I mean dense and challenging to read. And another one of the reasons is because the language that he uses and the syntax by our standards is a bit archaic, right? I mean, this stuff comes from the late 1800s. It's basically Victorian English, Victorian vocabulary that he's working from. So I don't use it a whole lot, but I want you to be familiar with some of the ways that he would try to express some of these really important ideas in the original language. So I'm going to put this paragraph up here. And this is the one where he really describes what he just said in greater detail. He says, "Man is created the image and likeness of God. Man is therefore a phase of God mind, and his mind must act like the original mind. Study your own mind, and through it you will find God mind. In no other way can you get a complete understanding of yourself, of the universe, and of the law under which it is being brought forth. When you see the Creator thinking out his universe as the mathematician thinks out his problem, you will understand the necessity for the very apparent effort that nature makes to express itself. You will also understand why the impulse for higher things keeps welling up within your soul. I'm going to leave that up for a few more seconds just to give that time to sink in. There's a lot to unpack there, isn't there? And imagine when Charles Fillmore was in his heyday going around to the different Unity centers that have been cropping up all around the United States, and he would do a talk on a Sunday or at other times. That's the kind of stuff he was presenting, right? And he did it to packed houses. Yeah, this is something that requires a lot of attention. And again, you can see from that it's a far cry from worthless sinner or worm in the dust kind of stuff. The part that I highlighted up there is where he's talking about an impulse for higher things that wells up from within. An impulse for higher things. What might those higher things be? Well, for Charles, the first thing on that list of higher things would be truth. And again, this is very consistent with what we find in many pre-Christian philosophical systems, Greek, Hindu, and others. So in a way, Charles is trying to bring back some of these earlier ideas that were pushed aside as Christianity became an institution and human beings subsequently lost their inherent divinity or worth and became wretches in need of saving. He's trying to go back to those ideas of truth and inherent divinity. Truth, goodness, and beauty, right? We say that every week. The true, the good, and the beautiful. Truth, goodness, and beauty are how the ancient pre-Christian Greeks summarized those higher things that we are naturally drawn to. The true, the good, and the beautiful, those were virtues that were identified by Plato as being necessary for a good or a happy life. And there are some people who say that unity is based at least partially on the work of Plato. They say that we are Neoplatonic in nature, which is to some extent accurate, because Charles had his own idea about our core human virtues, like Plato. He had his own idea about that, about the things that make for a good or happy life. Charles called them the 12 powers. You're probably familiar with that concept if you've been around Unity for any length of time. The 12 powers are Charles Fillmore's idea of the good, as in the true, the good, and the beautiful. That encompasses all three of those things. Now, if we were in a philosophy class right now, and some of you can probably breathe a sigh of relief that we're not, but we would be probably calling the 12 powers a system of virtue ethics, identifying the key virtues that we need to practice in order to have a good life. You know, the ancient Greek Stoics, one school of philosophy in ancient Greeks, they had their own set of core virtues, which are courage, wisdom, justice, and moderation. They would take those four and they divide them up into something like 18 more subdivisions, so you end up with a way more complex system than just the 12 powers that we have in Unity. The Buddhists, they had their own version of virtue ethics, their own version maybe of the 12 powers. They were called the paramitas, or the perfections. Instead of 12, though, they have 10. Things like generosity, morality, renunciation, wisdom, diligence, patience, honesty, determination, loving kindness, and equanimity. You're going to hear echoes of the 12 powers in there, but there's only 10 in their system. So what we're seeing here is that the numbers, whether it's 10, 12, or 18, really aren't all that important, because in many ways it's kind of arbitrary. In many ways It's simply a matter of how many slices do you want to get out of your pie, right? You can slice it into 3 big ones, or you can slice it into 12 small ones. The point is that everything is there. It's just a matter of how you want to slice it up. So for Charles, it was 12. And of course, for Charles, the number 12 has some symbolic importance, because in the Bible you have the 12 disciples, the 12 tribes of Israel, and 12 this and 12 that. So he was kind of tracking along with that. It was just something that was meaningful to him as a metaphor. So that's what Charles was up to. He was working out our own system of virtue ethics. And when we look at all of these different systems, whether it's Stoic, Buddhist, or our own system, we do see some similarities, a lot of similarities, and we see differences. But the one thing they all have in common is this attempt to identify what is needed to thrive and to create a world that works for all. Not just the elite and privileged, but these are things that everyone can practice, that everyone can engage in. I think it gives us a handy list of those higher things that Charles Fillmore was talking about, those higher things that we seem to be hardwired to pursue, that well up from within us, that urge to pursue those higher things. And when I teach the 12 powers, the order that I use is up here on the slide. You're going to find different orders in different places. The order is not all that important, although I will say that most often release and life are number 11 and 12, and the other ones get mixed up depending on who it is that's teaching them. There is no official order or hierarchy. This is just the one that is easiest for me to remember, and here's why. Starting out with faith and love. Paul, 1 Corinthians, right? Faith, hope, and love. Faith and love go together. Boom. That's the first two. Next comes strength and power. Related concepts, right? They're different, but they're related concepts. Strength and power. Wisdom and understanding, likewise, are related concepts. And then we get into a little exercise here where you could actually turn that into a sentence. You can say imagination will order zeal. There you go. So you got that all down. And then the last two are release and life. There it is. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, make up your own. Okay, so what we're going to do today is to take a quick overview of the 12 powers, and then I think next week we'll pick up with some of the practical applications and talk about how to use them in our lives, because that's what unity is all about, is practical application. We're going to start with faith, which is commonly used to mean believing in something without evidence, or even believing in something despite evidence to the contrary. That's the common usage of the word many times, blind faith, whatever, that kind of thing. You know, that doesn't work for me, right? That doesn't work for me. I like to talk about faith as trusting what we know to be true. Trusting what we know to be true. Because even when we know something is true, and even when we profess to the world that we know this and we believe it, we don't always trust it, do we? And by that I mean we don't always walk the talk. That's what it comes down to. So faith, at its most basic level, is about owning what we know to be true and trusting our ability to discern that and trusting in it enough to walk the talk. And then we come to love, which in unity we define as a conscious choice. There's that Daniel Nahmod song that we haven't done in a while now called Love is My Decision. It is a decision to see self and other as one. It is a decision or a conscious choice that we make to open up and expand our circles of caring and compassion instead of pulling back within our tribe and building up walls of separation. We come to strength next, which is our ability to deal with the world from multiple perspectives, to be able to see and appreciate the tangible and intangible sides of reality. It's our ability to be agile and especially resilient at the level of consciousness. You know, they talk about the strongest trees are the ones who in a high wind remain standing, but they remain standing because they know how to give just enough to deal with the tension that's being placed on them. So our ability to see the world from multiple perspectives gives us that strength, that resilience, and that agility. Power, which sounds like a closely related term, and it is, but power is a little bit different. Power is our ability to make our ideas known, to put our thoughts into action through the spoken word, which is where Charles Fillmore was coming from. But it also has to include the written word, and it has to include other ways of putting our thoughts into action and putting our thoughts into some kind of a tangible reality. We'll be exploring those. And remember what we said, and this has been a few weeks ago, I talked about something that Maria Nemeth, who is the founder of the Academy for Coaching Excellence in Sacramento, something that she says, something that happens when we have an idea or a dream or something like that that gets stuck at the intangible level of reality, it gets stuck at the metaphysical or intangible level of reality and doesn't get out into the world. When that happens, when it gets stuck at the metaphysical level, we are said to metafizzle, right? Because remember that word, metafizzle, like a dud firecracker. It's all great to have these wonderful ideas, but if we don't use this inherent capacity that we call power to put them into existence, to put them out there into the world, they don't do a heck of a lot of good, or at least as much good as they could potentially do. Next we come to wisdom, which is our power of judgment, discernment, and intuition. So wisdom is about knowing how and when to apply our critical thinking skills to a given situation. We gain knowledge through understanding. Another power that we're going to get to. We gain knowledge through understanding, which is how we come to know what is true, all right? And here's the key difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is knowing a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad, okay? Although some people might like that, but it doesn't sound like good eats to me. Understanding, as I just mentioned, understanding is that ability that we have to analyze, to gain knowledge, to perceive and to comprehend the world around us as well as our own role in the world. It's a crucial faculty that provides the basis or the foundation for many other faculties, which is why you'll sometimes hear Charles Fillmore and others talk about understanding as that which stands under, which serves as a foundation for some of our other powers, like imagination, wisdom, and things like that. And of course, then we come to imagination, a crucial component in creativity. And I think that's something that's unique to human beings. Our ability to imagine what it's like to be in the shoes of another person, that's a big one. That's what leads to empathy and compassion. But it's so much more pervasive than that. Imagination is the ability of the mind to be resourceful, to be creative. And think for a moment where we might be if we didn't have the kind of creativity and resourcefulness that we get from imagination. I suspect we'd probably still be hiding in caves, assuming we survived at all. So it's one of the major reasons why we're still here today and thriving as well as we are. Then we move on to the power of will. Now, the classic unity definition of will is the executive faculty of mind, all right? When I hear a word like that, I have an image that comes to mind, and this is for you Star Trek fans, and I count myself among you. I like to use the example of Captain Jean-Luc Picard, who, on Star Trek The Next Generation, says, "Make it so," right? Whenever there was something that needed to be done, he'd give an order, and then he would say, "Make it so." That's the power of will. And by the way, for all you Jean-Luc Picard fans, did you know that his character is coming back in a new series? Have you heard that yet? They are bringing him back. Patrick Stewart, the actor, is really happy about it. I can't wait, frankly, but He's the guy that says, make it so. And I know there's probably not a lot of Star Trek fans out there, so I have another metaphor that I like to use, which is this guy here, Larry the Cable Guy, who instead of saying, make it so, says, get her done, right? Get her done. That's the power of will. That's what we mean by the executive faculty of mind that says, make it so, get her done, whichever one you prefer. Order. Order is our ability to see life as the process that it is. There's an orderly process that needs to happen in a certain sequence in order for things to come into being. We use the concept of mind, idea, and expression as what we mean by order, or it's sometimes called the creative process. From mind comes the idea that then goes into expression. That's the order that it needs to happen in. And you get those mixed up and you may not get the results that you're looking for. So it's also about developing the patience and the courage sometimes to let things unfold in that order. We sometimes call it divine order, to allow the creative process to be what it needs to be without a lot of pushing, without a lot of anxiety. Zeal. Well, that's an easy one. That's all about our enthusiasm and our passion, the qualities that keep us focused and motivated. And it goes hand in hand with the power of life, which we're going to get to here in just a few minutes. You know, everybody needs a reason to get out of bed in the morning, right? And if that reason doesn't fill you with a certain amount of energy, zeal, passion, optimism, it's something to take a look at and just maybe get a better handle on why it is you're getting up in the morning. Release is sometimes called elimination or denial. I like the word release better, and I like to think of it as the ability to change our mind, the ability to change our way of thinking. Release is what makes it possible for science to work. When a hypothesis doesn't match the evidence, we don't try to change the evidence. We release the hypothesis and we try something new. We release the things that no longer work for our best interest instead of lugging around a lot of useless baggage. And finally, life. Life is our ability to express the quality of aliveness. What is it that brings life to what we do, and how do we express that quality in what we say and do? It really becomes an indicator of the degree to which we're aligned with principle or logos or whatever it is, that whatever word we want to use, whatever reality we're pointing to when we use the word God. And it's a little bit different from zeal. They go together, like many of our powers go together, but it's different from zeal. Life is about having a reasonably clear answer to this all-important question. Why am I here? Why am I here? It's about having an awareness of our life's purpose. It's about having a mission in life. Zeal, then, is about the passion and the energy that we bring to that mission, but first we have to be able to articulate it and express it, and it has to be something that comes from the core of our being, from life itself, our sense of aliveness. And then from there we get to the degree of energy and passion and zeal that generates in us that we can take into other areas of our life. Okay, so that was a bit of a whirlwind trip through the 12 powers. We're going to be spending, as I said, more time with them starting next week, and probably through September, and perhaps even right up to the time when we start our 7-week fall series in October, which I want to plug a bit right now, because it's going to be here before we know it, right? Kind of like Christmas, you know? Our 7-week series starts on October 14th, and this year it's going to be based on a book that came out in March called Resilient: How to Grow an Unshakable Core of Calm, Strength, and Happiness. The author is someone you might be familiar with, Rick Hansen. He wrote another book that Karen has worked with here called Buddha's Brain. I think she did a class on it. We did a meditation class, and I know she did a talk series on that book. Rick Hansen is a PhD psychologist. He is a senior fellow of the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley, just down the road. He's also the founder of the Wellspring Institute for Neuroscience and Contemplative Wisdom. He's highly in demand as a speaker and a workshop presenter. We know because we have tried several occasions to book him for different functions that we've had both here at Unity and Karen within the West Central region. He's a hard guy to get, but we have his books, which is a good thing because every year we learn more about the brain and what makes us tick. So it's important to keep up with the latest discoveries in neuroscience and then explore the ways that it can help us to thrive in a changing world. Stay tuned for more in October, and we'll pick up with the 12 powers next week. Thank you.